All right, and we're live for episode 15 of The Expert and the Idiot. We're here today with Abby Stone, the curly-haired keeper. I was looking at some of your animals for sale on your website yesterday, and they're pretty beautiful retics. Is that the first time you've bred yours?
Yep. Yeah, that's from the Aries Stella clutch. So it's our first clutch of babies. We are obsessed with them. So of course I think they're beautiful, but I might be biased. But Stella's gorgeous, and a lot of the babies take after mom. So yeah, but yeah, that was our first clutch.
Do you plan on breeding again?
Yeah, we do. We're going to do it because of the way that we prefer breeding and prefer keeping. It has to stay really, really small scale. So we're going to do, if we're breeding one of the larger females like Stella or eventually Centauri, it'll probably just be like one clutch a year, max 2 clutches. And then we do have a boa pair that we're planning on breeding in like 4 or 5 years. Nice. So in the further future. So
is that, do you have like a morph boa, or is it a locality?
No, it's a morph boa. So we have a VPI Paws Snow is the male, and then the female is an IMG Labyrinth Het VPI Paws Snow.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
I have an IMG Motley that I plan. Yeah, so he's like just totally black. You know, just a little bit of pattern left, but he loses it more and more with every shed.
That's awesome. Yeah, I liked the Labby in with the IMG because it retains a little bit more of the pattern. She might also be visual T-Paws. We're not sure. She might have that visual anery gene. It's hard to tell with IMGs, but we'll find out whenever we're able to pair the two. But yeah, I'm a sucker for some pattern.
Yeah. How many snakes do you have altogether?
Altogether, we are at...
Not counting the babies.
Oh, yeah, we only have 11 adults, subadults, and then we're keeping one of the babies from the Aries Stella clutch because we can't not keep a baby from that clutch. So yeah, we have a pretty minimal number because we keep larger, dwarf, super dwarf retics, so comparatively not super huge, but still on the larger end and very active end of the spectrum. We keep in bigger enclosures, so we have a decently finite amount of space. So at least at the moment, unless we're able to expand in the future.
Yeah. What got you into the hobby? What got you started with snakes?
I have been interested in snakes for all of my life. I was the weird 90s kid that was catching garter snakes in Oregon in the ditch bank and like showing my friends how cool they were and my mom, and they were all freaking out and saying how terrifying snakes were. And I just never got the terrifying bit. I was like, how are they scary? I'm so confused. So yeah, I've always been very lucky in the fear aspect because I was not born with it or learned it. So that was kind of a bonus. And then during lockdown, actually, when everything shut down in 2020, the hobbies that I was focused on kind of didn't exist. And I get very bored very easily.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's right. I really love reptiles. It was actually my hairstylist that started talking about his snake. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's right. I got so like pulled in different directions during undergrad that I was like, oh, right. I really enjoy reptiles, and kind of took a deep dive into researching for about a year and then got my first snake in 2021.
Oh, wow. So you didn't have any pet snakes or anything like when you were a child or anything like that?
No, not beyond like just trying to catch wild garter snakes as a 9-year-old and keep them in like the really crappy critter keepers that they luckily always escaped out of.
Yeah.
Because I definitely would have killed them. So, yeah, my brother kept like fish. He had an amazing freshwater fish tank. and I would keep like newts and stuff in there, but like the amphibians was as far as it would get. I think my mom was pretty averse to exotics, especially reptiles. She's terrified of like frogs. She's not terrified of snakes, but she doesn't really want them didn't want them in her house. So yeah. So yeah, I am like definitely on the fence of who's the expert and who's the idiot. And
oh no, well, I mean,
because I haven't been keeping for that long.
Yeah, but I mean, to successfully, breed animals and really, tuning into some of your Instagram live stuff, I've come in and I've asked you questions about how you keep with your setups.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what I'm curious about is, how are you doing the bioactive setup with such large, animals? Because it's a lot of people immediately say like, oh, it can't be done,
Mm-hmm.
or it's really difficult because they trample plants and things like that.
Yeah, they are definitely capable of trampling plants. It was some trial and error to figure out what worked best. But I found one, size of enclosure that they're being kept in makes a big difference because they need this space. If you have them like cramped into a smaller space and trying to keep bioactive and plants and stuff, like they really don't have any other choice but to trample them, especially the super active snakes like reticulated pythons.
Mm-hmm.
So the bigger the space you can give them, the better, especially if you're going to keep bioactive. And then the layout was the other learning curve of giving them alternative places to like perch and climb. So big branches, big shelves. And that does a pretty darn good job consistently keeping them off of the plants.
Mm. So what's like your minimum enclosure size for a retic?
So our hatchlings went straight into 2x2 bioactives, like right out of the, like as soon as they shed their egg skin, they were in a like little group commune 2x2 for a while until they shed their egg skin. But then they all are now in their own 2x2s. And as they're going off to their new homes, people have been putting them directly into 4x2x2s, and they've been thriving. So I always tell people, like, as big of a space as you can give them, they will utilize it. It's not true across species, obviously. Mm-hmm. But for like, we have, over 20 reticulated pythons, and every single one of them use every inch of space that we give them. Like I have two of my males out, like my subadult male who's currently climbing up Aries enclosure, and then my older male is out. They're just out exploring this room right now, and they, as you can see, will use every inch of the space.
Yeah.
It's a big basement. So yeah, they are very active snakes. And you're gonna fall because you're clumsy. Come here. So yeah, they like to explore.
How old is he?
He is just over 2. He was 2 the beginning of July.
Wow. Yeah. That's incredible how fast the retics grow.
Yeah, and he's a dwarf. So he's Solaire, 25% Solaire, 12.5% Calicoa, 12.5% Jamp. So he's primarily dwarf. So he's he'll probably max out around 10, 11 feet.
Yeah. So you keep just the retics and the boas?
We have reticulated pythons, we have the BCIs, we have a Colombian rainbow boa and a Brazilian rainbow boa, and we also have a scrub python.
What kind of scrub?
He is a hybrid. He's a Maruki and a Sarong.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's one of the hybrid babies from Never Seven over on Instagram.
Okay.
So Alexandria. So he's
awesome.
He's cool. He's our most defensive dude. He's very stereotypical, very opinionated scrub, but he's really cool to work with.
Yeah, it's kind of it stinks when certain species have a stereotype and then they live up to it 100%.
Right. He's pretty good though. I've been working with him for like consistently over the last several weeks going into his enclosure. He tends to be fine when he's out, but he's really enclosure defensive. And today I had my like hand in his enclosure, like almost touching him, and he was just looking at me like, can I help you? But he rarely strikes. So he just has that very opinionated shrug.
Yeah. So what would be a bad interaction if you were to put your hand into his cage? Would he strike at you, or does he flee? Is he just nervous?
His first reaction is just to sit there and process what's happening. They think so much, like you can see them processing the situation. So he'll literally sit there and just look at me and decide my fate. But 9 times out of 10, he turns around and is just like, all right, see you, bye. I have things to do. And he'll just move away from whatever is irritating in the moment.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet I have Timor pythons, and it's an uphill battle with them. You know, it's with the boas and things like that. It seems like, you know, you could go a week and a half or 2 weeks without taking them out, and when you do, you're right back to your normal interaction with them. You know, and with the Timors, they do the flee and pee, and you know, it's if you miss some time interacting with them, it's very noticeable.
Shows, yeah, for sure. Yeah, my boas are like puppy dogs. You just reach in and grab them out and go watch a movie with them. They're like, okay.
Yeah, they're the best pet snake. I really think boas are. Yeah, they're not like a ball python that, you know, will hide and not want to do anything ever. You know, they're still active and they'll interact with you, but they're so laid back and so chill.
Yeah, and there's like a really nice variety of sizes in boas too, depending on like a locality and things like that. I've had people tell me, like, I really want a boa, but I can't keep a big snake. I'm like, check out like Hog Island boas or you know, some of the smaller localities. They're just not as well known as I feel like they deserve to be.
Yeah.
How are these not some of the like most popular, you know, first pet snakes out there?
Yeah, there's awesome. Plenty of boa localities that max out at 3.5, 4 feet long. I mean, they're tiny. They're really small. I mean, you can look at Warren Booth's Instagram and see prime examples of that.
Yep.
Just very, very small, handleable animals. So when you set up a new enclosure, what company do you prefer? Which brand do you go with?
So our favorite company is Toad Ranch. So we have primarily everybody in Toad Ranch enclosures now, and we're doing upgrades soon for all the boas in one of our sub-adult retics. So yeah, Toad Ranch we've been using them from day one, and we've never had an issue. They're always down for doing, like Stella's enclosure is a custom from them. They do like the custom shelvings. They'll do like custom layout. So they're just a really great company to work with, and it's really high quality products. And yeah, I mean, they're not cheap, but they will last for a very long time. And they're like beautiful enclosures aesthetically. They're really hard to beat.
And it looks like you guys get like the deep substrate lip too, because I'm sure you need that with the Bioactive.
Yep. So we do minimum a 6-inch on the 4x2x2s. Anything bigger than that, it needs to be 8 inches, or like in the case of Stella's, hers is a 12-foot long, 4-foot.
Holy cow!
Enclosure. It's a big one. Let's see if you can see it. That is. So it is big. And she ate yesterday. I fed her yesterday, and I went down to check on her last night. I couldn't find her. She's 12 feet long. I lose her in that enclosure all of the time, which is like, that's when I know that it's the right size. It's like, okay, you're 12 feet long and I can't find you. I can't see you. If you don't want to be seen, I can see you. And that's ideal for me, because that's a good, like, I don't want the animals to be stressed. I feel like if they don't want to be seen, but they are and don't feel like they're safe and secure, it just is like this constant low-key stress, which can lead to behavioral issues and negative interactions and things of that ilk. So yeah, for her, she has a 12-foot or 12 foot, not 12 foot, 12-inch substrate dam. So that thing is not moving. It is so heavy. There's so much dirt in your enclosure.
Wow. You guys are so lucky to have a basement.
I know. We actually were house hunting for about a year and a half before we found this place. And one of the things we were looking for was a very large finished basement with natural lighting, which can be really difficult to find. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the layout of this space is pretty perfect for what we use it for.
I can't even imagine a 12-foot enclosure, because I have my Argentine boa in a 6-foot enclosure, and just looking at that, just thinking about that being twice as long is just crazy.
Yeah, it's a big one. It took 3 of us to get it up on it. We do hand-built stands that we can move with a pallet jack. So it took 3 of us. Like Garrett Hartle was over to help us with something else. I can't even remember. But we roped him into helping us move the giant. I had the frame all done. I had to move it on the stand. It took 3 of us to do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So how do you make your substrate? What is your substrate mostly, and like, what do you mix it up as?
So I got my tropical substrate mix, which is all I use because all the species I keep are tropical, is from Tanner over at Serpa Designs. He's actually one of the channels I spelunked the most when I was first starting to get into building bioactives, because his builds are just next level amazing. So he does 1 part just like regular soil without any fertilizer or anything in it, 1 part hardwood undyed mulch, 1 part sand, and then 2 parts sphagnum moss. I will also often add some cocoa fiber of some kind in there to help. It just seems to help keep the substrate a little lighter and fluffier, especially when there's heavy snakes moving all the time on it. And then I just sprinkle some charcoal in there for the cleanup crew and leaf litter. And that's it. Yeah.
And so you mix that up yourself?
Yes. Yeah, I get all of my stuff from, we have a local greenhouse that I just go get all of that substrate. I mean, when you're buying that much substrate to fill up a foot's depth of 12 feet by 30-inch deep enclosure, that's a lot of material. Yeah. So yeah, it's just, I find it to be a little bit more affordable. And once you know what's safe for the animals and what to look for and like the substrate ingredients and stuff, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty easy to accomplish. Nice. Yeah.
So what are you doing for a cleanup crew?
We have isopods. So all the tubs up there that I'm going to switch out to prettier enclosures for the isopods because I'm extra. We use, for the babies, we use like Oreo crumbles, like the smaller guys. Mm-hmm. They're really good at cleaning up any waste, but they're not so big that they're going to get overly prolific and take over the enclosure, or potentially cause any, like if a baby gets like a scrape or anything like that, those isopods aren't going to nip them. And then for Stella's enclosure, she has a really healthy colony of both Oreo crumbles and dairy cows. Dairy cows are like the bigger guys, and they are protein fiends. Yeah. So if you have a bigger snake that has a higher metabolism, that poops a little bit more often, those are wonderful to have, because I literally just, like, I'll spot clean a little bit, but half the time the isopods have just rushed the fecal matter before I even get a chance to see that she pooped. So I just mixed it in the substrate, and it doesn't smell.
That's wild.
It's crazy. I highly recommend it. If you can get that balance right, it's so wonderful.
Now, have you had any issues with mold or anything coming up in the substrate?
Once in a while. Generally, I find that happens if the animal is starting to outgrow the enclosure, because there's just a little too much biomass happening for the cleanup crew to keep up with it. And the cleanup crew will naturally control the population of itself in an enclosure. So if you have a smaller enclosure, that population will max out. And if it maxes out at a point that it's just not enough to take care of the the mass that's being produced by the animal being enclosed in that space, then that's generally my sign of, okay, time to upgrade that kiddo.
Wow. So that's crazy. Because I tried doing the whole bioactive thing and I was still spot cleaning though. And then I started getting like little mites and stuff. And I was always kind of in this low key anxiety state where I wasn't sure if I was seeing snake mites. And of course, there's so many different kinds of soil mites. And then I was using magnolia leaves and I was getting mold on the underside of them.
Oh, gotcha.
And it was like I couldn't figure it out. And it definitely wasn't that the animal was too big for the enclosure. I think those leaves were it just wasn't a good match. I could never really figure it out. So I just switched over to cocoa chip, and I still put in a cleanup crew, but I spot clean. That's wild that you don't have to spot clean with a 12-foot snake.
I mean, I still go in and like aerate the soil and like mix it in.
Yeah.
But her isopod colonies are just so robust. It's gotten to the point of they just take care of it. And I still need to, like, she'll pee and leave urates on her shelves sometimes. So it's not like you can set up a bioactive and be like, cool, I'm never going to touch it again. Yeah. I've never been able to do that. I'm sure there's people who are way more knowledgeable about like finding that eco balance in a little tiny environment like that. But yeah, for the most part, for me, I love the aesthetic of it. That's for me, right? And the other thing for me is it doesn't smell.
Yeah.
Which is a bonus. So, and the animals seem to really enjoy that kind of natural environment. They have trees they can hide under. They have kind of lots of different options.
What are your go-to plants?
Go-to plants for, okay. He's curling up behind me in my chair for his nap. Go-to plants. Snake plants work really well. Generally, I find the taller varieties of snake plants rather than like the short and chunky ones. The taller ones actually tend to work a little bit better and thrive more. Ficus is a wonderful species to go with. There's a bunch of different varieties of ficus. Ruby ficus, rubber trees are a type of ficus, Ficus elastica, and ZZ plants are another one that are like one of my go-tos. So Stella has ZZ plants. Show you. I don't know if you can see it or not. So she has ZZ plants in that corner, and then a couple different ficus varieties in the other far corner. I planted those last August. She's been in there for just about a year now. I have yet to need to replace any of those plants. I do have to prune them back because they grow so fast.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I did dart frogs, and I remember like once everything gets established, it's an uphill battle just trying to chop it back. Like things can take over like crazy.
Yep.
So that, and I think that, I've never tried the live plants, and I think that was an issue with the mold too, is that it wasn't aerating the soil, because I know that the plants do that naturally. So that's got to be awesome having that set up with the plants in it. I'd like to take another stab at it one day, but I think like my substrate dams are only like 4 or 5 inches. So it's hard to get the depth that you need.
Got it. Yeah. So something I found that helps with that is we have our Brazilian rainbow boa who's in line for one of the upgrades that we're ordering. We got her when she was 2 days old. So she was tiny, and she's now a year old, and they grow really small. So she's in a like a little cube custom that I ordered from Toad Ranch. And rather than, she doesn't have any plants actually planted in the soil because the substrate dam needed to be shallower because it's such a small enclosure. I just keep the plants in the pots.
Oh, okay.
And put snuggle the pots into the soil.
Okay.
And oftentimes the plants will actually root through the pot into the soil, but it just makes it a little bit more stable and gives the plant a little bit more like resistance when a snake is like exploring through. Because if you plant like you said, if you try and plant in that shallower substrate, it doesn't give a whole lot of stabilization to the plant. And you can't purchase really well-established larger plants either because they're root structure is going to be too long. But yeah, just keep it in the pot and boil around it.
Now in the 12-foot cage, those are fully planted in there, right?
Those are fully planted. The other thing I found works really well if you're planting out a really large enclosure for a larger animal, buy really well established older plants. Because the ZZ plants were already, significantly big. And then same with the ruby ficus and the other two that I have in there. So, and that seems to help because the root structure is just huge and heavy already. So if you have that, and then I have cork bark around the plants to help stabilize it further, and then like larger branches and stuff up around the plants, and that tends to keep her from climbing out. She just feels more stable on the larger branches than on the plant that's gonna like move back and forth. So it's been working really well.
That makes sense. And especially like choosing the ficus. My wife had gotten a ficus back in March for her birthday, and the thing, it was 2 plants in one pot, and it shot up so quick that she separated them, put them in their own pots, and then they grew like another 2 feet after that. It's ridiculous how fast they grow.
Yep. Yeah, they grow really fast. We have several ficuses propagating from cuttings from Stella's ficus trees in her enclosure. So yeah, they do really, really well. And because of the biomass produced by the animal that lives in there, by Stella, they just get this really rich, wonderful fertilizer that just they just thrive.
I bet.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's got everything. I mean, they're eating whole prey items, so it's got everything that they need in it.
Yep.
And how do you handle heat in your enclosures? What are you heating with?
RHPs are our go-to for retics because they like to climb.
Yeah.
So RHPs, and we're slowly switching over to VivTech. So all of the baby enclosures have VivTech UV lights. They're a little bit more compact than the Arcadia that I've used in the past. So the roof footprint is a little bit more minimal, and you can get like the cage thing for the VivTech mounting swivel mount. So, which is perfect for retics because they will, if it's in there, they're going to climb on it.
Yeah.
It's just going to happen. So yeah, but RHPs are our go-to. We're playing around with different brands of RHPs and what works best. But I have a 120, 180. I can never remember. Whichever the biggest Vivarium Electronics brand. I have one of those in Stella's enclosure. I have another one that she somehow managed to knock off her roof. 12-foot snake vibes, apparently. So we'll reinstall that one before wintertime hits. But in the summer, even just heating the one side is plenty. The biomass, it takes a while, but the biomass will retain a lot of the heat and a lot of humidity. So it's really easy for that one RHP to give a really nice gradient of heat in that enclosure.
Now, RHP, for anybody that's not into snakes or new to the hobby, can you explain that?
That is an excellent clarification. Radiant heat panel.
Okay.
They're the little flat guys that you install into the roof of. They work really well with solid PVC tops. Okay.
And now what are you looking at for your temperature range? What is it on the cool side? Do you temp gun it?
Yes. So I still temp gun. We have Govee wireless hygrometer thermometers in each one of our enclosures, just so we can be OCD about it and check it on our phones when we need to, or if we're not at home. But we do that's the other lovely thing I personally enjoy about keeping larger is if you have something fail because you already have a preset gradient, it's not automatically detrimental to the animal. So I tend to keep my retics a little bit cooler. I base it on their behavior, but for Stella, she has her hotspot is where that top shelf is, and it's about a foot below her radiant heat panel. That never goes above 89. And then her cool side will drop as low as 70. And I catch her hanging out on that cool side all of the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So up on that shelf, that's 89. What is it below that, like down at the substrate?
Down at the substrate, it will go like the substrate right below the RHP usually comes around 80, 82.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. And she's currently, she ate a sizable meal yesterday. We're still getting her to put weight back on after her maternal incubation. She's in that black hide that's underneath that top shelf on the substrate. She's in there digesting right now.
Okay. How often does she go up to that top shelf?
It's so random with her. Sometimes she goes up there to digest after a meal. Sometimes she goes into her hide. Sometimes she goes over on the cool side to digest. So I don't know. I haven't tracked it close enough to see if it's like type of feeder, because we do give her a variety of feeders, or size of meal or anything like. I haven't quite gone into that much detail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you keep your humidity level at? What does it read on your hygrometer?
Again, it's a gradient because it's the closer you get to the RHP, the lower the humidity is going to be. But I aim for between 60 to 80% on a gradient.
Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes.
And how are their sheds with that?
The last several, so Stella and Aries, who is currently climbing on top of the isopods, they are my trouble children when it comes to shedding, but the last several sheds that they've had have been complete sheds without anything stuck.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Especially for retics, because they're kind of known for having bad sheds.
Yeah. Yeah. So having them like consistently, sometimes it takes a few sheds, like if you're moving them from a different housing situation or bringing them into your home as a new pet, depending on kind of their history of sheds, it can take them several shed cycles to kind of acclimate to that new environment. But I've found eventually they all will give you a nice, clean shed. Stella still has never given us like a complete shed because she like tears her shed on all of the stuff that she's moving through. But the last 2 or 3 sheds she's had have been like no problem, no stuck shed, residual shed on her.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you take out the shed skin, or do you leave it in there for the isopods?
So there's always going to be little bits left for the isopods. Those I leave in there. For the big chunks I remove.
Okay.
Just because
that's a lot.
Yeah. Sometimes she will go potty in it. So that's kind of gross anyway. But yeah, if you have too much shed that's left in there between the fecal matter that the cleanup crew has access to, and like any substrate breakdown or plant breakdown, the snake shed is just a little overkill, and that can lead to additional molding. So I just take that out to prevent that.
Yeah. 12-foot animal. Her shed's got to be 13 feet long, probably, when it's all stretched out.
Yeah, if not longer. Usually the sheds are about 20% longer than the animal.
Yeah, that's a lot of skin for the poor isopods.
They're like, oh.
Yeah, I've noticed that they eat. It doesn't seem like they eat the belly scales. For some reason, they always seem to leave the belly scales.
Yeah, they tend. I've noticed when I'll toss sheds into my isopod tubs, like little bits of sheds sometimes. And if there is belly skews, that's definitely the thing that takes the longest for them to break down, or it just breaks down in the substrate. Yeah, they're picky that way.
And what about the UV? What percentage UV bulbs are you using? And if you could maybe cover both the Arcadia that you used to use and then the new ones too, I'd like to hear about that.
Yeah, let me look it up because I always forget. It's the jungle cover ones. Viptech. Let me just hop on their website. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, we use the jungle cover from Viptech. Do they have the percentage on here?
Do you remember what you used with the Arcadia ones? I'm assuming that those were the T5HO, the high outputs.
No, actually, I think they're the 2.5. They're the lower inputs.
Oh, okay.
So. And the reason that I went with that is because of where I place them. So they get a certain percentage depending on how close to the UV it is. So I do my best with the enclosure layouts to replicate what they would be seeking to experience in nature. So the UV, I mount and aim at their basking spot where it gets hotter, because in nature where the sun is shining and beating down on, that would be the warmest spot. So because that's a little bit closer to the light itself, I do a lower percentage.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like mine are about, probably 2 feet away, more or less, maybe like 20 inches away from the bulb. So I think it's the 6%. But
Okay.
when I set up, I have a lot of Morelia that when they go into their enclosures, I'm probably going to go with the 2.5%, the lower percentage, since they'll be closer to it with more climbing areas and branches and things like that.
Yeah. The Morelia like to perch like right under it too. I will say, just for anyone keeping visual albinos looking to add UV to their enclosures, we do have UV for our visual albinos as well. And they use it, they bask, and we'll soak it up. The most important part with that, if you're going to do UV for a visual albino, is to give them options to hide completely from it if they decide that they want to move away from it. But we haven't had any issues with like vision or sunburns or anything like that. So definitely utilize it. They might just utilize it a little bit less than some of our other not visual albino kiddos.
Do you do UV across the entire enclosure or just on the basking side?
On the basking side.
Okay.
Yeah. We usually, again, I very much try and give gradients wherever I can and give replication of natural habitat and environment to the best of my ability, given the amount of space that we currently have.
Yeah. So do you think that you're going to end up with a bigger basement and more animals, or a separate building, or?
We would love to. I mean, dream, could very possibly pipe dream would be to build a separate greenhouse, almost like greenhouse barn hybrid building, and have dedicated spaces for the pythons that are completely secure spaces, complete with a playground, if you will, like a huge space with huge trees and floor to ceiling space. So we can have the option of opening up enclosures and just letting them explore to their heart's content without having to be supervised, have it that secure that they can just open it at night if they want to and let them just go do their thing. So that would be, I would love to do that. I'm a behavior junkie, so I really love to see how behaviors shift and change depending on the environment that they are offered. So they're really interactive. Most of my retics are choice-based, even the babies. So I wonder if that would shift if they had even more space, or if they would be even more chillaxed. How would that affect the behavior? So, but yeah, we'll see. Eventually, maybe I need to get through grad school first.
What are you going to school for?
Clinical mental health.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And that's funny. I wish that I had a doctor where I could be like, oh, you keep snakes, and they would understand me.
Yeah, I had an interview with my clinical site on Thursday and met with my supervisor, and we were just chit-chatting, and we were talking about odd animals. I was like, yeah, I keep a couple of publicly hard to love animals. And she's like, oh, can I ask what you keep? I said snakes. And she's like, oh my gosh, me too. I was like, what?
Really?
Yes. I'm like, what are the chances? It was hilarious and wonderful. But yeah, her and her wife they have they don't have a ton of snakes. They have a little hognose and a Kenyan sandboa. But yeah.
That's awesome.
What are the chances? It was so cool.
Yeah. What do you think that snakes are a good, a therapeutic animal? Because
Absolutely.
I've noticed that I've got a whole, I've got all my own issues. And I swear when I got back into snakes, it felt like a lot of it I got relief from it.
Mm-hmm.
It was something that I could focus on, and they are they're like a therapeutic animal because they're so calm.
Yep.
And there's no loud noises. It's easy to get in. Just taking care of them is kind of therapeutic. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so there have been studies done actually with the therapeutic properties of working with snakes, and they had found really interesting positive effects of working with snakes with autistic children, which is fascinating. For me personally, because we all have our own things going on, our own issues, our own strengths. And for me personally, I find because you need to be mindful with them, whether you're working through defensive behavior or just working to ensure that they have a positive interaction with a human, it really kind of forces you to get out of your own head and just live in the moment. And I think that's animals across the board, but there's just something about snakes in particular that push me anyway to do that. Just kind of sit with them and observe and just be in the moment, which is incredibly healthy.
Yeah, that makes sense because snakes can be a little bit sketchy sometimes in their behavior, where they can go into food response mode or something like that. So yeah, it's not like your dog. Like your dog
Right.
loves you no matter what, and it's like your dog's never gonna all of a sudden like think that you're a food item, or that a part of you is a food item. So that does make a lot of sense that you would be more in the moment, more just keyed into them and their behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I love working with my scrub so much, because he's incredibly attuned and sensitive to his surroundings. So if I'm working with him, he's very much a one-person snake still. So he'll bite my husband, he'll bite anybody else who tries to hold him. He's super extra. But he'll sometimes get to points like I let him climb on my shoulders, and he'll like periscope so high because he's a scrub. And I have to be really mindful if something startles him, whether I notice or not, if something throws him off, he'll go into defensive mode. And I then need to mindfully make a choice. So I'm not paying attention and move my hand in the wrong way, my hand's going to get bit because he's going to think that's the threat. But if I'm paying attention, I can make the choice to interact with him in a way that drops him out of defensive mode. And like he realizes like, oh, okay, everything's fine. And he goes back to chill exploring. It's just a really, I don't know, it's hard to explain unless you've worked with snakes before. It's like, it kind of helps remove that fear of getting bit, because you're making that choice to interact with the animal in a way that works for the animal. And I just think that's the fact that we can do that is pretty magical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you really need to be you need to understand them and their body language and all that. You have to really be paying attention. That is kind of the benefit of, the snakes that are, not beginner snakes, like the scrubs and, like with my Timors and everything like that. Like it does require a lot of attention and everything. What were the studies with children with autism?
I am looking at some stuff right now. I'm going to see if I can find some empirical research. There's an article on Ann Arbor Family Press that just goes through like 8 reasons to consider a snake for your child with autism. Yeah, so the findings that they found so far is the touch of the snake being like soothing and grounding. Mm-hmm. I think is amazing to point out because so many people think they're slimy. Who've never held them before. I'm like, no, it's actually so much different. So this is something I was going to point out too, and points to what you were just talking about. Snakes are really excellent teachers of empathy. So if you want to work with these animals effectively, you have to tap into your empathic side, because you really have, like you were saying, you have to be able to shift your perspective into their world and to be able to understand their body language and what they're non-verbally communicating to you. And that language is so different than what we're used to facial expressions as humans, right? Which I think is so funny working with Cogs, because he just has the permanent, like, judgmental, irritated face because he's got that typical scrub face. It's like, no, that's not necessarily what he is experiencing in any given moment. I have to pay attention to more. I have to pay attention to his body language, his muscle tone, his posture. Like, there's so much nuance to it, and you really do have to drop into, okay, let me put myself in your, I guess, hypothetical shoes, because you don't have feet, and see if I can better understand how you are experiencing the world. They see colors differently than we do. They see heat signatures differently than we do. There's never an action that I truly believe there's never an action any animal takes without a reason. Behavior is always because it's always because of something. There's always something behind a behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can decipher that, that's pretty cool. And that also speaks to your ability to tap into that empathic side of yourself, which is also healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, I could really see that. It's funny that you said that about just like the feeling of petting the snake and things like that, because my Argentine boa, there's a couple things there, because I know that you had a post up where one of your retics was kind of pushing and she undid the locking mechanism on the cage.
Yep.
And the way that she was pushing was the exact same way that my Argentine boa pushes. And she only does it when I'm in the room. So, because I have cameras and I'll watch her while I'm at work. I'll put the camera up, and while we were on vacation, I had motion sensing on the camera, and she never did it one time. And
It's funny.
You know, it's so interesting, because it's like, it's when I'm in the room, she wants to come out, and then if I put her up on my shoulders, she is so content there. And especially if I'm walking around the house and I'll notice that I'm just like petting her the entire time, doing something with my other hand and then petting her and keeping her stable with the other.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's funny how, that behavior of pushing with her, I was really concerned. Like, is it too hot in there? Is it, what could this problem be? And I think it's really just when I'm in the room, she wants to come out and interact.
Yeah, I feel like these animals are so much more in tune emotionally and interactively than we ever suspected they were. Mm-hmm. And like, luckily it's such a fun time to be involved in the reptile community and snakes specifically, because I feel like snakes have always just been kind of like, whatever, they're not, they're just snakes, who cares? But now certain advancements in technology, like cameras, right, are allowing us to see the reasons driving certain behavior. And it's really cool to hear situations like that, where it's like, oh yeah, they only push if I'm in the room,
mm-hmm.
and then seem to actually enjoy, at least to some extent, coming out and spending time
mm-hmm.
with a person. Like, I have one boa that she will beg to come out when there's a thunderstorm, and she does not. She'll just pace if I leave her in there during a thunderstorm until the thunderstorm's over, and then she goes back in. I was like,
wow,
hold up. Like, what is going on? So yeah, I think they're far more in tune, because like I said, we're so used to expressions, like facial expressions and verbal expressions, that when you have a relatively silent animal like a snake, he's climbing on top, oh buddy, like a snake that they don't have eyebrows, they don't have movable eyelids, they are missing a lot of those facial expressions that we're so accustomed and reliant on to tune into, in terms of how to react and interact and respond to another living thing, that we just haven't been able to realize to what extent they experience things in the world. And it's like, that's a human fault. That's not their fault. That's a human failing, and something that we are just now starting to be able to acknowledge and be like, oh, wait, no, it's not that they don't. It's just we haven't been able to decipher what it means. Yeah. And I think it's just so exciting that people are starting to explore that and tap into that a little bit more.
Yeah. Does your girl, does she push all the time? Like, or is it only when you're in the room?
She pushes. It's mostly when I'm in the room. She will push during, like, if there's a thunderstorm happening and I'm not in the room, she'll pace and push.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some of the babies definitely will like fiddle with their locks when no one's not in the room. But something I've noticed about all of the animals actually is if they're like curled up sleeping and you open it up and like show them that you're there, they'll wake up and like come right on out.
Yeah.
Like, which I think is really cool because it's something, even as a snake lover growing up, that like those types of behaviors continue to surprise me as I gain experience caring for these animals. I'm like, whoa, this is cool.
Yeah.
You would do this.
Yeah, and that's kind of what makes me sad about my Timors is they're so afraid, you know, and so it's, if I want to interact with them, there is no other way for me to do it than for me to just go in there and scoop them up and get them out of the enclosure.
Yeah.
Because if they're in the enclosure, they're just terrified of me, you know, and even if I open the door and they come out, as soon as I move, they're like, oh my God, you know, and they go and hide somewhere.
Right.
So
yeah.
it's,
right now.
Yeah, I knew that they were going to be a challenge, you know, and they've definitely been a challenge compared to like the boas and things like that, which are just different animals.
Cakewalk, yeah. I also feel like there's more generations of captive bred boas than Timors, than scrubs. So I do think that makes a difference. Let me fetch Shy from the top of this enclosure really quick. Hold on 2 seconds.
Okay.
There you go. You're on the top. Ugh. See, this is why I keep a step ladder. Okay. Come here. I know. I took away all of your hard work.
Now, do they ever like get into stuff and unplug electronics and mess things up on top of the enclosures, or?
No, for the most part, they're pretty darn good. The biggest thing that has ever happened is Aries has knocked over some springtails. But for the most part, they seem to be pretty mindful of their space. April has broken a coffee mug. She's one of my bigger girls. But as soon as she knocked it over and it broke, she like froze. She's like, oh, what happened? It's really fun. But yeah, no, they're pretty good. I trust them, you know, to some extent. He's just clumsy. So he'll get up on top of enclosure and then like slip and like fall.
Yeah.
So I have to keep an eye on his clumsy butt.
Do you think part of the thing, like the reason why snakes are so good, you know, like maybe with somebody that has like sensory issues, is the fact that they don't make noise?
That could absolutely be the case. I know I've worked with autistic children in the past, and actually still do off and on, but physical contact on their terms seems to be really impactful, especially for nonverbal autistics. So I think that probably has something to do with it as well, because you can feel every single like intricate muscle moving on a snake when you're interacting and holding it. It's like crawling on you. So I think that's pretty cool. You can also feel the stress level of the animal.
Yeah.
Like you can feel when they're chill and moving around, and you can feel when they tense up. That's why I like free handling all of my snakes. I don't tend to use the hook a ton because I can't get any sensory information from a hook. I can get nonverbal visual cues from them. but I can't get those like nuanced, subtle bits of information that I get when I'm working with them with my hands.
Now, what about the other end of the spectrum, talking about how therapeutic snakes can be, and then going to the opposite side where people have this paralyzing fear and it causes a bunch of distress, and the way that they seem to deal with that stress about snakes is by talking about the violent things that they want to do to them, you know, often with fire, you know, and you see a bunch of that, which is, you know, it's like, imagine if somebody didn't like dogs and they said, yeah, set all dogs on fire. You know, it's just such a horrible thought. And I don't think that those people realize for snake lovers, you know, what a horrible thing that is to say.
Right. And like this dude, like he climbed up on my shoulder on his own and I was just giving him smooches. So, I think, you know, ophidiophobia is crippling. It's a phobia for a reason, right? Like it's a phobia of snakes specifically. I know a couple people who have it and they know that they have it, and that's the important part. I think they know that they have it. Like even seeing like a video of a snake, even if it's like one of the, you know, completely wholesome videos that the majority of my Instagram is, they can't deal. They're just like, nope, terrified. So I think it's that lack of acknowledging the fear that then leads to justification of hating the animal and wanting to kill them on site. I can't tell you how many times people have told me to kill Stella, or that they want to kill Stella, or that I'm the devil because I keep snakes. I'm like, you are right. I am the devil. You should go on and skedaddle. You don't, you know, you're not in the right. You don't want to make the change or do the work to make the change to conquer that fear. And I think that's the biggest thing. Buddy, oh my gosh, come here. You are a troublemaker. I honestly think that's the biggest thing, is people who grow up with a learned fear or even a justified fear. Like if you had a traumatic experience with a snake growing up, or saw a traumatic experience happen with somebody else with a snake growing up. If you are not in a place to do the work to conquer that trauma, because it does take a lot of work. It's hard to conquer a fear. It takes a lot of mindfulness. It's way easier to just sit in that fear and justify it than do the work to get over it. So my approach with the people who are afraid of snakes that show up in my life is to acknowledge that fear. Be like, I see you're afraid. I see it. It's okay to be afraid, right? Fear is an emotion. Emotions are very personal. Same thing with pain, right? Like I'm going to experience pain differently than you are. That pain tolerance can vary from person to person. It's very personal. So I never want to feel like I am invalidating someone's emotions, because emotions aren't fact, but they are very real to whoever is experiencing that emotion. The people who are afraid, I've found that as soon as you acknowledge it, it works as a turning the light on the monster in the room, right? If there's a monster under the bed, okay, turn the light on, acknowledge that it's there. What is it really like? Like look that in the face and really define it. And I think acknowledging someone's fear helps them in that first step. So I really make a mindful effort I never make fun of anyone who's afraid. I will call out people who are mindlessly hating or threatening my animals. Not all the time. Most of the time I actually just ignore them, because I'm like, you're not in the right place to want to change. If you don't want to change, then that's the thing that needs to happen, right? But I will say, for the people whose fears are acknowledged, that then opens the door for them to start being curious about why they're afraid. And when we're doing outreach events in person, we've had several people who I've seen afraid, Like, cool, I see you're afraid. No worries. Let me know if you have any questions. By the time we were done talking, they were like petting, if not holding, a snake. And I was completely curious. Like the curiosity trumped the fear, but the fear needs to be acknowledged first before that can happen. I think that's something that sometimes gets skipped. Like we have the funny memes of like, you know, oh, if you're scared of snakes, you're, you know, whatever. I don't think that helps a ton. I think that harms more than it helps.
Yeah.
Because you're making fun of someone's very real experience. And that's invalidating. And it's just going to push them away.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my very long-winded take on fear. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I mean, it's something that I think every person that keeps a snake encounters is you're going to run into the people that just want to do violent, horrible things to your pets, and will say that, and it's kind of this, you know, it's like this very obvious fear response, but to them, this is how I'm going to show everybody how tough I am, is that I would just kill them to deal with that fear.
Yeah. Or they have the like really, they double down and say, no, my fear is my hate and desire to do harm to a pet that you love is justified because, and it's usually some very interesting interpretation of the Bible or, you know, there's scientific proof that snakes don't feel anything, that they can't bond with anyone, that they, you know, are sizing you up to eat you, are all of our favorite snake tropes.
Yeah.
So something, the one thing that I've found for a saving grace for my own kind of emotional and mental health when going through, sometimes the social media can be really mean and there's a lot of bullies out there. So I will just come back at that hate with curiosity and be like, oh, interesting. Like, what do you think she eats? Like, what is her diet?
Mm-hmm.
What tells you a snake doesn't feel emotion? Like, what is your experience with that? And just get curious about their experience. And that very often throws them off because they are expecting people to resist their hate with their own defensive reaction. So if instead you take a step back and be like, I wonder why you're feeling that way. Because that's interesting. Like, because it's very different from my experience, and none of us experience the world the same way. So tell me about it.
Yeah.
And like asking for more information will almost always either, I have had people actually apologize and be like, oh, I guess I have the information wrong, which is rare, but it's happened. Or it just throws them off and they just leave and like block me or something. I'm like, that's fine. You can block me. Like the more you comment on my stuff, the more the algorithm will feed you similar stuff. So if you really don't want to see stuff about snakes, just leave it be.
Yeah. So in my mind, I always think like when I'm dealing with somebody in person that obviously has a phobia of snakes,
Mm-hmm.
I always think like if they just would pet the snake or hold the snake, like everything I think would melt away. Like all of a sudden they'd see this, they'd feel and see this, you know, thinking animal that's actually, you know, quite gentle and, you know, isn't out to harm them.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you get to that point? How do you get to where they're handling it or touching it without you forcing it on them? And then it's an even worse experience and you're a jerk in the process.
Right. Yeah. You don't want to go run to this person with a snake and be like, here, it's fine. Because you're just going to add to the trauma because they're not ready yet. And I think that's where we were at an outreach event. It was outside. It was an outside market. And we were there with some of the retics. And there was a lovely woman who was like across the street. But she was looking into the booth and she had her young child like on her hip. And I like waved at her and she was like, I'm terrified of snakes. I'm like, that's okay. Like I can see you're, keeping your distance. That's totally fine. If you have questions, we're going to be here all day. She circled back around after a while on the same side of the street. I was like, okay, that's a pretty significant improvement from the last time I saw you. And she asked, she's like, I just don't get it. Why would anyone want to keep these things? And instead of getting offended and being like, what's your problem, right? Instead, I was like praising her because I was like, look at you, you're on the same side of the street. That's awesome. And any question is always welcome. And started going through my own personal reasons of like, well, this is why I really like them. Like, you know, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but this is why I enjoy keeping them. And by the end of that conversation, she was like, okay, I get it now. Like, they're really fascinating. And she was like petting one of the retics while she was having this conversation. I was like, that was amazing. Cause it's like, that's such a huge stride and not everyone's going to get there, and that's okay. And just kind of not taking it. I think because the majority of us as snake caretakers are very empathic, we tend to feel that fear that they're experiencing and understand how unjustified it is. And we really want to help them get over it.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of like, oh, how can I prove to you that these aren't worth all that time and energy of being afraid?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just hard. I guess it's just up to the individual then to, you know, whether or not they want to, you know, go towards that interaction and kind of go towards that fear. I mean, I remember, I think what got me obsessed with snakes was my uncle had Burmese pythons when I was a kid.
Oh, awesome.
And when I first saw them, I was just terrified. And then he's telling me a story about how one of them bit one of his friends and things like that. And I was probably like 4 or 5 years old.
Oh my
So
God.
I'm just sitting there thinking like, oh my God, these things, you know, they're bigger than me, and it bit one of his friends, you know, but that fear turned into curiosity. And then once I finally got my first snake, it just snowballed from there, and it was an obsession. And, you know, so is the fear of snakes, is it a learned behavior, or is it something that people are born with?
I think it is a learned behavior. They recently did a study over in Europe of placing, you know, babies and toddlers with snakes.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah. So that was an empirical study that was done, and the parents were in a separate room, and the parents were freaking out, and the babies were like touching them on the head and like had zero fear of these whatsoever. So I feel like that's pretty powerful data to help us start really diving into, is it inherent or is it learned? And it's pointing to, all the research being done is pointing to, it is a learned fear. Media doesn't help.
Yeah.
Right? Like kind of the biblical trope of, you know, the devil showing up as a serpent doesn't help. Yeah, it's really, humans are fascinating. I'm like, we're the ones with the issue, not the snakes.
Yeah. 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 And it doesn't help when, you know, somebody gets bitten by a snake, and, you know, then everybody in the whole state is worried about rattlesnakes or some sort of a venomous species that, you know, got a little bit of media attention.
Yeah, and I don't think AI is helping either, because if you look up, we recently had someone inquire about a baby who lives in New York. And I was like, I don't think retics are legal in New York. You can get a permit for them. But I literally just Googled, like, are reticulated pythons legal to keep in New York? And it came up with, they're considered a dangerous species, so you need a permit. And then continued on, they're also considered venomous. I was like, hold up, whoa. AI, come on. There's so much misinformation out there, and AI is taking it and regurgitating it. And I'm like, this is not helpful. So yeah, but there's a lot of work to be done in terms of, you know, sharing and helping to show the general public that these animals are not what they are often made out to be. and at the same time, as an individual, acknowledging what I truly have in my control to do and what I don't. And what I don't have in my control is making someone change their mind or change how they're feeling. That's like, I can share my experiences. I can be mindful about my approach. But beyond that, there's not a whole lot that I have in my control.
Yeah.
So kind of not taking it personally and just letting things, letting things be when they're not ready to change yet.
Is that what got you into the outreach? Can you walk me through the outreach and how you guys got started with that and how often you do it?
Yeah, so we did it more often last summer. Our friend Joe Hull, who's G.I. Joe on G.I. Joe Super Dwarfs, he works at Retail Reptiles. The town that he lives in was doing a summer night market, like first Thursdays of every month. I can't remember, on a regular basis throughout the summer last year. And he really wanted to do that and wanted kind of some extra hands on deck. So we started doing that. And I've worked in education for the last decade, 11 years. Whew, I'm getting old. And really love sharing information with people and watching people take and digest that information and then get really excited about it. Because it's something that they didn't know. It's like, oh, this could be a new, like, really impactful thing in someone's life. So yeah, that's kind of the reason driving the education, and also just sharing, docile retics with people to help kind of put the word out, even if it's just planting a little seed of like, oh, I'm terrified of snakes, but I walked by this one booth and all the snakes were super chill and like climbing faces in their heads, and like everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves. So sometimes just planting that seed can have some long-term effects.
So is that like a kind of a farmer's market kind of deal, like set up?
No, that particular one, the outdoor market, it was a bunch of different vendors, like crafters and stuff like that. We also we need to do another one soon. We do outreach events at one of our local plant stores in a neighboring neighborhood, which is super fun because we do like a snake day and like bioactive chat. So people will stop by who are just looking for plants and see snakes and they're like, what? And get all curious. And we also have people who keep snakes already who will specifically stop by to like ask questions about bioactives and stuff like that. So, which I love. I've been doing more and more like bioactive setup consults and stuff for people, which I absolutely love.
That's awesome. That seems like the best way to do it. If you could do any kind of outreach where you're going to be coming in contact with people that normally wouldn't be coming in contact with snakes. That way it sparks the curiosity and they can see the personality and touch and things like that. Whereas like if you go to a reptile expo or a show or anything like that, it's people that want to be around reptiles, so that's cool that you can put yourself in an environment where people wouldn't have that exposure otherwise.
Yeah, that's a good point, because expos are definitely like preaching to the choir kind of thing. But yeah, doing taking the animals to school events or those night markets or like a plant store or what have you are so fun, because people do, you get to catch those people who really love the animals but didn't realize they love them until they had that moment, which is just, I think, very powerful, very impactful, very magical. So yeah, I would say if you keep docile snakes and want to do outreach events, just start asking people. Like we literally just asked the people who own the plant store and we're like, hey, can we do a snake event, like snake and bioactive? And they're like, oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. Neither one of them had ever held a snake before. And they were both over where we were set up. Be like, I want two. I was like, here you go. And they were obsessed. It was really cute.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's something I want to get into, especially here in Florida, because we have, I feel like, the ultimate negative feelings around snakes because of the Florida python. I mean, they're here, they're not going anywhere.
Right.
The government is a big part of the python hunt that they do. I think it's annually. And it's just celebrating going out and killing snakes. So overall, it's not good for native species then.
Yeah, and I agree. I think you're doing, it's Pavlov's dog, right? Like you're encouraging and training people to kill a snake on site. And most people, even those who work with the FWC, which we have seen, are not the best at identifying snakes.
Mm-hmm.
And those who don't even care about identifying, they just want to kill a snake because they don't like them. And the justification is, oh, I thought it was a berm. I'm like, okay, like that's just, and obviously the berm hunt doesn't help at all. Like you said, I think it's doing more harm than good because it then conditions people to kill snakes on site. And that's not good.
Yeah, and I was actually talking with FWC a couple weeks ago, and I told them, I said, how can I said, do I need any license or permit to be able to remove a snake if somebody finds one, specifically through work, because it's something that we deal with on occasion. And I said, I would rather remove the snake than have the snake killed. And she said, we need, it's important that people stop killing our native snakes because the thing that controls our population of venomous snakes is our native non-venomous snakes.
Right.
That's what's eating rattlesnakes, is the king snakes and things like that. So if you're killing snakes that are supposed to be there, it causes this negative chain reaction.
Yeah, it throws off the whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I still feel as though kind of the demonizing of the berms is really at the root cause a distractive tactic from the land developers. That's the most negative impact on pretty much everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Decimating native flora and fauna to build housing and pave roads. Like that's doing far more harm than the Burmese python population.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just so much hype and focus because snakes are such an easy thing to demonize because of the history.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, that's such an easy scapegoat. It's like, come on, do better.
Yeah, and I mean, this entire state is a watershed, and all we're doing is just cutting through and putting roads up, and you're cutting it's. And that, I mean, since COVID, it's just been destroying our state, is the development, the condos everywhere. And, giant swaths of blacktop with stores on it and things like that. And everybody's putting their focus on killing snakes and not looking at that. And now FWC is looking at removing our gopher tortoises from the threatened species, which is just going to put the land development into overdrive because that's the one thing that's been keeping them in check.
Yeah. I mean, the whole board of directors for, or not the board in general for the FWC is they're all, property development investors or, car dealership owners. And I'm like, how, like it's a very corrupt system, and it's not just Florida.
No,
there's that issue all across the states, and again, it's just because of the general public's feeling about snakes is just such an easy distracting tactic.
Yeah.
So the more people who are able to go out and do education programs and share these animals and kind of educate, the better, because you need the sympathy of the general public to really enact any sort of public change.
Yeah.
It works to our disfavor more often than not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely something that I want to get involved with. I want to start. I mean, my both of my kids are in elementary school, and I feel like that would be a good place to start. Is bringing the snakes into classes and things like that.
Yes, the kids go bonkers for snakes. It's so cute. We did a pre-K kindergarten class at the beginning of the summer, and those little ones were like, "Whoa!" Because to them, like our 7-foot long retic Aries is like so big and so cool.
Yeah,
They're not afraid. They haven't learned to be afraid yet.
yeah,
At least the majority of them. So.
yeah. It's usually the teachers. That's the barrier of entry.
Yes, there's usually at least one teacher way back in the far corner getting as far away as they can. And there's like in line with the kids, like, I want to pet it. I was like, go for it. Like, yeah.
I know. I tried setting one up. I tried setting up bringing in the snakes to my older son's classroom, and the teacher was like, maybe we could set it up outside in a pavilion, or just was very not about it. So
that's funny.
do you do any do you still, I know you said that when you were a kid you were out catching wild snakes and everything. Do you do any herping? Do you ever go out in the wild, or is it something that you're keyed into if you're hiking or out and about?
I definitely am keyed into it when I'm hiking. I am the person who will stop and notice, a caterpillar crossing a busy bike trail and pick it up and move it. I also I moved a snapping turtle across the same trail, which was super fun. And it was a trail that gets like dogs and kids walk along it all the time. And I'm like, oh, this is going to turn into something really bad. Because there's no like sign. There's always the like keep your dogs leashed signs that a lot of people don't pay attention to or choose not to follow. And then there's no signs about the local flora and fauna and what to look out for, right? It's like, oh, you have a 5-year-old. They're going to see a turtle at the side of the road, and everyone loves turtles. That kid's going to wind up missing a finger if you don't know what you're looking at.
Yeah.
You don't know how to safely move it in a way that doesn't harm the animal and keeps all of your fingers intact.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't specifically go out to herp. I don't catch anything. Like I said, the only thing that I'll physically move is if it's in danger or endangering surrounding, passers-by. I will absolutely nerd out at any animal that I see in the wild and just kind of like spend time with it, I guess is the best way. I don't like to catch them in their own homes. I feel like it's a little intrusive. I feel like I'm already being slightly intrusive just by being there. But yeah, there were several black rat snakes that we would come across when I was walking my dog in Baltimore. And those were always fun to just sit and watch because they would like periscope and of come up towards you if you're chill and calm and like check you out and then just go calmly on their way. Like no fear, just chill. Like, you guys are cool.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
We were just in Washington State, and I was hoping to run into some more snakes, but the only thing we saw was one garter snake, and it was pretty far away and bolted when it saw us.
Yeah, garters are a little flighty.
Yeah, but I do want to get down. I want to get down to the Everglades and see the Burmese pythons down there if I can. That would be neat. But I don't know. I feel bad for them, and I'm so torn on it because I know that they are having an impact on the native population of animals down there and everything. But I don't know. I feel like there's a more professional way to handle the problem, and instead of it being this snake murder fest.
Yeah, that doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
And like the definition of insanity is keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. It's like you're not getting a different result. You're just perpetuating the fear and the desire to kill these animals. And like we talked about, if you can't differentiate between species, or if you're just trained now, conditioned to kill a snake on sight, that's really detrimental. That just further, it makes the problem worse. So I agree. It's the same with the lanternfly population that we've been dealing with on the East Coast. It's like, kill it on sight. And it's like, it's not these animals are so prolific, it's not going to matter. Unless you can get 100% of that population, you're just killing for really no reason, because it's going to bounce right back the following season. So there's definitely, I feel like science is working towards better, more humane approaches to reducing a population of invasive species, which is so important, because the way that we're doing it now is just not, it's not healthy and it's not sustainable.
Yeah. It's kind of like the feral cat population in Florida. We have a lot of feral cats, and obviously they're causing a lot of they're having a big impact on a lot of our native species. But what they do is they catch them, they spay and neuter, they cut their ear so that way they can identify them as being, fixed, and then they release them. I don't know if that's necessarily right either, because you're releasing something that is going to
continue killing the local flora and fauna.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I know for a fact that they've already pushed bird species to extinction that, are ground nesting and things like that. So yeah, I mean, they do the same thing. They go out with the wild hogs and do they shoot them from helicopters, and they just leave the bodies. So we talk about not being able to feed our population, or that we need more healthy food options, and yet we're leaving hundreds of pounds of meat to just rot in the woods.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, like I said before, it's not the problem of the animals themselves, it's us.
Yeah.
The people, we're the problem. And like, if people really want to get down to the brass tacks of it, humans are the most invasive species.
Oh yeah.
In the world. We're horrible. And we're also the most detrimental to our environment. So it's like, where's the solution for that?
Yeah.
But it's not something that is even on anyone's radar, especially the people who are pointing at, the burn population and saying, kill them all or whatever. And it's like, or pointing at, like, I've been harassed for keeping non-native species in Pennsylvania. It's like, if it wasn't born there, it shouldn't be there. I'm like, were you, is your ancestry from where you're from?
Yeah.
Like, if you really want to get pedantic, it's just, yeah, humans are fascinating. Hypocrisy is a very human trait, and none of us are immune to it. None of us.
Yeah.
But I think there are definitely things that we could be and really, really need to be doing better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a North American parrot, and we pushed those to extinction. There should be a parrot flying around in North America, and I mean the quote unquote natural landscape that we look at is completely unnatural. I mean, since the population explosion in North America, it's been completely changed.
Yeah, we have invasive, Russian olive trees, all over our property. And those aren't native to Pennsylvania. They smell amazing when they're blooming.
Oh, I bet.
But they're an invasive species. Same with a lot of the ivy, the English ivy around here. It's not like, it's like all of that is here because of, human migration, not because the plants decided to hop a boat and, let's move over to America.
Yeah.
That wasn't their decision.
Yeah, and that's the same thing with the pigs and the cats and the snakes. It's all here because of us. They didn't say, "Man, I'm going to go mess up the Everglades real quick. Let me go check that place out."
Yep. Yeah, so I understand the pushback of like, oh, it's not a native species. Why do you have it there? It's like, I understand that. and also believe that, one person's poor keeping or, bad decision shouldn't affect everyone.
Yeah. Well, and not to mention, if any of your snakes, God forbid, they got out and you weren't able to get them back, they're not in your state. They're not going to survive the winter.
Nope. They're not going to survive past October because it gets the night drops really. Like, we're already getting into the mid-50s at night here.
That's wild.
Yeah. So
you guys are so lucky.
I know. Yeah, I do not do well in the heat. I am a vampire. I'm from Oregon. I like the clouds. Everyone gets so bummed when it's raining. I'm like, oh, it's raining. I'm so happy.
Yeah.
So funny. Yeah, Florida is. I enjoy a Florida visit. I would die if I lived there. But yeah, people are so funny with snakes. I did have someone tell me that she would come onto my property and get my snake to bite me so that she could then have the snake killed. I'm like,
what?
You're on my property harassing my animal. Like, that's on you, boo. Like, you the one that's going to get in trouble. She was so mad about it. I'm like, what is happening on social media right now? It's just so funny. I'm like, just the mindset of, and like we were talking about earlier, it's just the fear. It's the fear and the unwillingness to acknowledge that it's our problem, not the animals.
Do you ever plan on incorporating snakes into your professional life?
I would love to. I do a lot of the work that I do right now is very arts centered. So I would love to do arts in like nonverbal communication. I used to do partner dancing. So I would do a lot of like nonverbal communication for younger elementary school students who are like, in that developmental process of learning interpersonal skills. Mm-hmm. And I think that'd be really fun to incorporate some of that nonverbal experience and empathic understanding using the animals that I have. I think that'd be really cool.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
You could get the best of both worlds.
I know, right? Yeah. So we'll see. I don't know what kind of like regulations and like waivers would need to be signed to make that happen. But I'll definitely be taking a deeper dive into looking at what that would be.
Yeah. Well, even if it could end up in some published papers of, of using snakes for mental health and everything, that would be incredible.
Yeah. And I know there's some ongoing empirical studies happening. So being able to kind of contribute to those would be really cool.
Yeah.
Do my PhD on snakes and therapy.
Oh, heck yeah.
Cool.
That would be incredible.
Yeah.
What do you keep your boas the same way as you keep your retics?
Yes, they are currently in smaller enclosures. They're the ones that are getting the majority of the upgrades soon. But yeah, they are on, all but one is on Bioactive. Our other BCI Law is not on Bioactive, just simply because she's in a different brand enclosure and the PVC is so thick. She's on paper because any kind of substrate in there makes it way too humid.
Oh.
It's humidity too much. So yeah, but she'll get an upgrade. We're in the process of getting custom layouts over to Toad Ranch to get some new stuff built.
Nice. So they're going to have kind of the same 89 hotspot and all that?
Yep. Yeah, I keep them temp-wise, humidity-wise. The rainbows, I keep their humidity a little bit higher. Mm-hmm. And that's really easily done. In a Bioactive, you just add a few more plants and, water the plants a little bit more often than you do the other ones. So it's really easy to adjust the humidity level in theirs. But yeah, that's the plan, and get them a little bit more height. They like to climb. So they'll all be 6 foot long, 40-inch tall, 30-inch deep enclosures.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah. So they'll have lots of space to explore.
Do you mist or do you just water the plants and that takes care of it?
I usually just water the plants. In wintertime, I will mist. If I mist in any of the other seasons, I run the risk of mold developing. because it just makes the top layer kind of wet, and then it just, kind of sits there. But if I water the plants, then it goes down into the soil and just retains a little bit more moisture instead of and then the soil isn't wet, which is, I think the animals find that a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah, maybe that's what my problem was too, because I was misting, and I know what you just said is 100% what I would have. It would just sit on the magnolia leaves, and then, like, as it would dry, then the mold would show up.
Yep. Yeah. So definitely, I mean, we were having that issue even in our isopod tubs, where we would mist, but then like mold would happen like crazy fast. So instead, I got a tip from, I think it was from Dirt Daddy, where you just take a little bit of water and pour water into the tub in like 1 or 2 corners, and then the water will kind of leach into the soil and make it moist instead of wet. And we don't have issues with mold anymore.
Dang, that's some good advice right there.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to do that, because I have a isopod tub as well, and same thing. It's like you put in a little piece of food or something like that, a potato or something, and it gets all nasty and moldy.
Yeah, because I started offering them calcium powder on veggies and fruit, which they absolutely love, and haven't had issues with mold with that. We give them dried shrimp, as long as I don't overfeed them. We don't have any issues with mold. And then in the case of if we had a baby or two refuse a meal here and there when they were in shed, so we would they were eating small to medium mice, so we just toss the unused feeder in with the isopods. And they would eat it, no mold, nothing. So the nice thing about having the protein lovers is they will recycle food that isn't eaten.
Yeah.
We do frozen thawed, and I hate wasting, essentially a little life.
Yeah.
So we do our best to recycle everything.
Your dairy cows, do you have any that end up being completely white?
Not yet.
I have a bunch like that, and I've been wondering if that is, I don't know what the heck is causing that, where they're just turning completely white.
I don't think I have any completely white. Yeah, no, they're all pretty cowy. Ooh, they're so fast sometimes.
I wonder what I'm doing wrong.
You could just have an interesting morph variation.
Yeah, it's like they start out like the parents that I got were all dairy cows, and then the offspring, I've been getting a lot of just totally complete white ones.
Interesting. I love dairy cows. They're so fun.
They are cool.
You can see them. Yeah, I have these guys, and then I got some giant canyons from Rolly Boys. And then I have zebras too, just because they're my favorite. They're just for me.
Yeah.
I love them. And they congolate. They do the little rolly thing. My other ones do, and I think it's just so cute.
What do you guys use as food items? Do you do just rodents, or do you ever do any birds as well?
Yeah, so actually for the retics, they get majority fowl, chicken and quail, including Stella, including our big girl. They get generally 2 or 3 meals of fowl, and then we'll toss in a meal of either rabbit or pig or rat, or like mice for the little babies.
Okay, so you're doing predominantly quail and chicken. Interesting.
Yep.
And have you noticed anything with their stools? Like, does it make it looser like that, or is that because I've noticed that, like, if I go from all rodent to quail, then immediately after they have a loose stool, and I've wondered if it's just because they're not acclimated to that food item,
More than likely. I noticed when I started doing, switched that balance over to more fowl feeders than rat or pig or rabbit, their poop started smelling much less. So that was a plus, and is also a sign that their microbiome is healthy. Yeah, that's kind of the biggest thing. I know when Stella went off food when she was on her clutch. She was off food for almost 3 months. So when we transitioned her back onto food, she had soft stools for the first few feedings. And I think that was, again, just her gut getting used to having food. So I would assume that the soft stool that you were saying was probably just the animal adjusting to that different feeder.
That's interesting. So maybe I'll try just do it, because I have like so many. I got a lot of chicks, because chicks are pretty dang affordable. They're way cheaper than rodents, which is wild.
Yeah, and then rabbits are really expensive.
I bet. Yeah, I bet. So maybe I'll just try doing more chickens, more quail, and see what the result is with that.
Yeah, just like consistently try like 2 or 3 meals and see if that changes anything.
Yeah. How often do you change your water bowls?
Every other day, because we're extra.
Holy cow. Man, that's a lot of work.
It's not too bad. We have a pretty good system, and we also have a bathroom down here, which is super helpful. But yeah, I mean, once in a while we'll go 3 days. When I'm traveling for work, depending on, so April O'Neill, who is our other adult female, she's in that top enclosure on top of Stella's. She can be slightly extra. If I'm traveling for work once in a while, she'll, go 4 or 5 days without a water change.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the most part, it's every other day. I've just noticed especially for my rainbow boas, actually, whenever I change their water, they almost always immediately come out and drink the fresh water. So yeah, they seem to really enjoy the freshness. So that's my main reason. We don't panic or you change it once a week or horrible.
Yeah.
It's just, that's just our preference for what we do for these guys.
What are you using to clean the bowls?
I usually just use Dawn dish soap and a scouring pad. We have so many bowls at this point. Running them through the dishwasher takes a little bit of time. Mm-hmm. Although we are due to do that again, because the dishwasher definitely sanitizes them better than, hand washing can ever do.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's either Dawn dish soap and scrubbing. No, we don't wash the bowls every other day. That would be way too much. But I will go through and wipe the bowls out with a paper towel if there's some residual algae or anything.
Okay.
That's the other really good tip that I recently found out is I was having algae grow super quickly in the water bowls. I'm like, is it the bowl? Is it what is it? And someone pointed out if the bowl is sitting directly underneath either the LED or the UV, it will grow that flora very quickly. So I moved some of the bowls to see away from the light or underneath the shade of a plant, and it reduced it so much.
Really?
Yeah. So if anyone's trying Bioactive and running into that issue, move the water bowl to a shady spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the best tips I ever got.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I usually put mine towards, the heat and light source just to help with humidity.
Yeah.
But, yeah. I mean, so what are you doing every other day? Are you taking the bowl out and then dumping it into a bucket and then just refilling with fresh water?
Yep.
And then once a week you do the full scrub down?
Yep.
Okay. All right. I don't feel as bad now.
Yeah. I mean, they're, for the most part, especially when they're in larger enclosures, they're pretty clean animals.
Yeah.
We rarely, once in a great while, one of them will potty in their water bowl. Mm-hmm. And obviously we'll clean the whole thing out, even if it's not due yet.
Sure.
But for the most part, they're all pretty good about, some of them will actually poop underneath the water dish where all the isopods live. It's like DoorDash for isopods.
Yeah. Nasty.
Delivery. Here you go.
That's funny. It's crazy how they always seem to poop and pee in the worst possible places. I feel like my Timors go through some of the artificial plants and they'll position themselves right in the center of the plant, and that's where they go. Yeah. I don't know if it stimulates their body as they run through it, or what it is, but
or if they just know that that's going to be the hardest thing for you to clean.
Yeah, they're like, all right, come on, dude. This is all you.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite is when they paint the glass. Picasso style, which Stella tends to like to do. I'm like, girl, if you're gonna wipe your butt on anything, does it have to be the glass?
Yeah, yeah, they'll do one pane of glass and then the side of the cage and then the back corner.
Yeah. Oh, snake artistry at its finest. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nasty.
The joys of keeping.
Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate all the time you've given me and all your insights and everything. And it's cool to get different perspectives on how different people keep. And I just like talking to all different people, and it's fun talking to people that have 400 or 500 animals, and then talking to people that have less than 20. And
yeah, that's awesome.
That's kind of where I fit into. So I do have kind of the space to give my animals more room and everything. I'm never going to be a professional breeder or anything like that, but I do want to breed, and I think it's cool that you guys did that and that you have more breeding plans and everything. And I looking at your website, it seems like you guys have kind of a like a vetting process for where your animals are going to go.
We do. Yeah, there's two really big questions I ask myself when it comes to either posting on social media or breeding, bringing more of these animals into the world. And that is, am I making the work like that USARC is doing and like the rules and reg things, am I making their work harder by what I'm posting, or am I helping? And then as far as the breeding things, for the rescues and the surrenders and the animals that get turned loose in the world and the hobby, am I approaching my breeding and placement of animals in a way that helps or like that contributes to that problem or helps diminish it? So that's kind of our justification for the vetting process, as well as just ensuring we have we're really looking to provide very high quality, very socialized retics for pets for people. Because I think they make wonderful pets when they are raised correctly and kept correctly and worked with responsibly. So creating that support system long-term for the longevity of the animal, because we also have if life happens and you need to release the animal back to us, we have a no questions asked policy in terms of that as well. So we just want to make sure people feel supported as they work with any animal that they get from us. So that's one of the other reasons for that vetting process.
That's awesome. That's a great policy to have. And I mean, that's something that I've thought about, because even just when I've gotten back into keeping, there was a couple animals that I was like, well, why did I get this? It's, it's not really fitting into what I want to do, and then you rehome it and then you realize that you rehomed it to a flipper, and it's like, oh, that's not what I thought was happening here,
Right. Yeah. And there's a couple of questions to ask, and, that very often don't get asked. But also we're not professional breeders by any means. I don't really consider myself a breeder at all. We do MI here. I'm like the mom's doing all of the work. I'm really just supporting her to be able, like facilitating that for her. But yeah, we don't really have the desire to do this professionally or full time. That's one of the reasons, we both have alternative jobs. We never want to feel like we brought these animals into our home, into our care. They didn't ask to be brought into our home, into our care. So we then don't want to make it their job to pay for their existence. You know what I mean? So I feel like that just adds stress to something that we really love and are passionate about. So yeah, that's kind of our approach.
If somebody wants to get one of your animals, what is that vetting process like?
So it goes through we have a baby application form, And it just takes you through some general questions, asks, your experience with animals, if you've kept any reptiles before, what type you've kept, what your plans are for the animal. Like, are you looking for a pet? Are you looking for a breeder animal? And a couple other things. And then it goes through to our email, thecurlyhairedkeeper.com at gmail.com. And my husband is kind of the sales side of things. So they get a call from my husband. He'll talk with them and get a little bit more details on what exactly they're looking for, on their experience with keeping animals, if they've kept retics before, and all of that stuff. And and then if they decide that there's, a baby that they want to move forward with, and they send them a sales agreement, and off we go. So,
nice.
Yeah.
So if somebody doesn't have any experience with snakes, does that automatically bar them, or does it take more, what is that like?
So if it's someone who's never had a snake before and they want to get a retic, I always make sure that they've done the research. Oftentimes it's really easy to tell because they're very often very excited and talking about like the setup that they have for them, and, asking questions about the details of the setup and, what works and what doesn't, which is always really fun. So we're always down for first time snake keepers to get a baby from us, as long as they've done their due diligence as far as research goes. And then we're always here for, any issues that they may need help with. Yeah. Behavior wise, keeping wise, what have you. What are you doing? Oh, that's Aries. He's hiding down. I forgot he was. I will forget he's out sometimes because he'll just hang out on top of an enclosure and then come back. I know. I've seen him cruising around back there. Yeah, he's so funny. You're going to knock over the isopod if you're so bad. But yeah, I always think the best first snake, like if someone is really interested in snakes, the best first snake they could possibly get is a species that they're passionate about. Yeah. So you wouldn't recommend, hey, go get a corn snake first, and that'll be your learning animal, and then you can come and get a retic, and then you won't know what to do with your corn snake. Exactly. And that's a problem, right? Like people get their trial snakes, and it's like, but they're still alive. Like we still have our first snake we ever got, which is our Colombian. We will have her for forever. We love her. Yeah. We don't have any like breeding plans, nor have we ever. Oh, good job. See, look, he's going through with the isopod. I see that. He's not knocking anything over. At least not yet. I might have spoken too soon. Good job, buddy. You're doing it. He has spider web all over his face. Oh boy. He gets so dirty when he's out playing. It's hilarious. What kind of isopods do you guys use? We use Oreo crumbles and dairy cows are the two that we use. Oh, I'm sorry. I meant springtails. I already asked you about that. They're just the tropical, like the stereotypical cheapo white tropical. Yeah. Springtails. There's like the orange ones that you can get, the orange tropical springtails that are like really big. They look like little Cheetos. Yeah, yeah. But they're so expensive. Yeah. So it's like, I'm not that passionate about springtails. I will use the cheapo ones, and they work just as well. So I haven't had a ton of luck with them for some reason. I feel like I always add those ones to the enclosure, the ones that, come on the clay, and I just never see them really take off. And I started doing, I wish I could remember what they're called, but it said something like ants. But basically, they're like a different kind of springtail, and when you disturb the substrate, they kind of come up like ants. Oh, interesting. Yeah, it's really weird. They're a bit more. I would say they're probably like twice the size, and they're a little bit more robust, I think. And but yeah, I constantly find the piles of bodies floating in the water dishes. Yeah, we get springtails in the water dishes all the time. Which I just then rewatered their plants with the same water to preserve, because the springtails are alive. They're just like on top of that top layer of water bouncing around. But yeah, we haven't had too much of a problem. The only thing that we had happen was some of the baby enclosures, because we didn't have enough isopods restock them all right away. So we had, I can't remember what they're called. They're not harmful to snakes at all, but they're like little white. They look very similar to springtails, but they don't bounce around and they're a little bigger, and they'll actually crawl on the snakes. They're not snake mites or anything. They're harmless, but we were able to completely get rid of those super easy with predatory mites.
Oh, okay.
Just sprinkled a little bit of predatory mites in each one of the enclosures, and they took care of them in like days.
Really?
Fine, yeah. And then we just restocked the springtails and restocked the isopods, because I think the isopods also ate them as well.
What happened to the predatory mites? Did they just die out?
Yeah, they die after they run out of food source. They die out after about 2 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I noticed that. I think that's what I was seeing when I was doing Bioactive initially. I was finding like 3 different kinds of mites. There was wood mites and all this other stuff, and it was too much. I was constantly anxious that it was snake mites, you know?
Yeah, that's fair. It oftentimes takes a Bioactive a little bit to balance itself.
Yeah.
Generally, once the cleanup crew gets to a certain point, the cleanup crew will take care of any of those mites, because the isopods will just eat them.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, which is nice.
That's awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Abby. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, you are very welcome. This was great. I like the deeper dives into stuff. So
yeah, I think it'll be very helpful and informative, because we covered a lot of stuff for the Bioactive, and there are so many questions around that. And I think from what I'm hearing, deeper substrate, more plants, don't mist.
yeah, water versus misting. I mist in the wintertime, like I said, because it does get overly dry, so there's not really a chance of mold happening. But yeah, for the most part, it's just water the plants and surrounding substrate. And it takes less than I think a lot of people realize, less moisture for it to humidity level that you're looking to hit. Yeah.
Right on.
Keep the plants in pots if you have a lower substrate dam. You can still have live plants in there.
Yeah, I think I might incorporate some of those.
Yeah. And they just look pretty. Hi.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Adam. Have a good weekend.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.